Hello everyone. This video looks whack because I'm trying to film when it's a little later and the lighting is not being my friend. Wait, how do people with glasses make ring lights look good? What is going on? I think we're just gonna have to accept that the lighting in this video is fucked up. Hello. Today is another rereading challenge video. Earlier on in the year, I set myself a challenge to reread what I called my favorite books back when I was around 16 or 17 years old. I've done a few of these already, but today I want to talk about Every Day by David Levithan. Each time I reread one of these books on this list, I really question the criteria that I used for these books to be my favorite. Because it's not that I think these are like awful books necessarily, I just think they're rather mid. I really don't see the special element that I saw to these books. So the concept of this book is that we follow this person called A, who inhabits a different person's body every single day. A has absolutely no way to control this. They don't know whose body they're going to end up in next, just that when midnight hits, they will go into another person's body, usually somewhat nearby, maybe around 2 hours drive maximum. One day, A inhabits the body of a guy called Justin. Has a pretty regular day, except from when A meets Justin's girlfriend, Rhiannon, and then A falls in love with Rhiannon. A lives by a very strict set of rules where they're desperately trying not to impact the person's lives that they're inhabiting. They will just try to get through every day, making sure that they don't ruin any of the relationships, making sure that the homework is done, very much maintaining the status quo of the person that they're inhabiting. By falling in love with Rhiannon, A has to learn to break some rules. The gist of the book is that A then spends their time trying to get back to Rhiannon. Obviously, when you switch bodies every 24 hours, you can't control where or who you go into. It's difficult. So it's a very intriguing concept, pretty quick to get into it. Say what the main positives of this book is that you don't really need to spend ages trying to figure out the physicalities of it, how it can be possible. You kind of just accept that A doesn't have any better idea of why they're like this than we do as the reader, or what enables A to do this. And the further you get through the book, the more caveats that A introduces. You know, all these questions where you'd say, well, what happens if you just try to stay in the same body? Or what happens if you died when you're inhabiting this body? David Levithan as an author does cover this, but not right up front at the beginning, so it feels like extremely expositionary. So I do still think that the pacing of this book is pretty good. You're not kind of getting all the answers straight away that make it feel boring. There's enough to keep you hanging on as a reader to want to find out more about A's story and how things work. The other thing that's great about this book is that it very naturally has a huge host of characters, so it doesn't ever really feel like it's getting old. Every day you're introduced to these new characters, and A is integrating into this new person's life, this new person's family, their home life, their school life, their relationships, their friends. So I'd say that David Levithan does have a bit of fun with this. You get a wide range of characters. This book is incredibly queer, way queerer than I remember it being, but that is probably why I liked it so much when I was younger, because it was just nice to read about queer characters that weren't a big deal. Like, it wasn't the whole crux of the story. One day A does wake up in a trans man's body. I'm gonna say it's not the most well written. It hasn't aged greatly, let's just say that, and there's some weird character reactions to A being in that body. But naturally, A sometimes wakes up as a girl, and when A is chasing Justin's girlfriend Rhiannon, who is straight, there becomes some questions of, you know, is Rhiannon attracted to A, the soul inside the body, and can Rhiannon see past A being in a woman's body when Rhiannon considers herself straight? I still found those elements entertaining to read about. The last positive I'd say about this book is that it's quite accessible, it's quite easily written, and I'd say that for a lot of David Levithan books. Even though some of the topics are harder hitting that he covers, generally his writing is accessible and easy to read. And sometimes you just need an easy book to read, you know, and not everything can be super complex. I do think that concludes my list of pros about this book, though. I have some beef. The flip side of one of the pros is that you get to explore all these different characters because your main character wakes up in the body of a different person every day, is that there are times where you feel a little bit like David Levithan is just trying to like tick off an EDI quota. I think it's more the way that he writes some of these characters. There's a very bare minimum understanding of those people's lived experiences. But unfortunately, I think because he's trying to cover such a wide range of different people's lives, it comes across a bit shallow. Like, we're never going fully in depth to any of these people. A inhabits this body for one day, then moves on to a next one. There are some exceptions to this, but the majority of the time, right, we're with this character, we learn about this character. I feel like we don't learn much overall. A is kind of this weird spirit or soul or alien, right, who is technically only 16 years old, having lived through so many different lives and from so many different perspectives has like this otherworldly wisdom to them as a character, which makes it kind of difficult to imagine them developing as a character. Obviously, the plot of the story is that Abe falls in love and allows themselves to break the rules that they've made for themselves to survive so far as the being that they are. But that's kind of it. I feel as though David Levithan used A as more of a mouthpiece for all the life lessons that he wanted to teach his audience. So A is more of a vehicle to portray all of these ideas and all these thoughts on life and how to live it. A ends up feeling not like a character, but just a collection of thoughts and wisdom, and therefore the character development point for A is really hard to see. It's really hard to view A as a character when they're so wise and they've learned so much. I think there is a small element of character growth towards the end that A learns from Rhiannon, but not enough really to justify the way that every day is written. Another one of the big cons, a really big con that stuck with me for a while, and the more reviews I read of this book, the more I realized how egregious this fucking chapter was. There's a chapter where A wakes up in a fat person's body. It doesn't really provide much merit at all to the book, aside from making me hate A and hate Rhiannon. The entire chapter is A just thinking, thank fuck I don't have to wake up in this person's body ever again. Like, as if being a fat person is the worst possible existence for A. Like, to put this into perspective, one of the chapters, A wakes up in a literal child slave's body. This teenage girl whose entire family are housemaids, and instead of going to school, A has to follow along this girl who is doing unpaid slave labor. I think the fat chapter comes after this chapter as well. So A has lived through the life of a child slave and still thinks that waking up in the body of a fat person is like the worst existence there is. I don't know if David Levithan thought through this hard enough. There's really no further reflection on this point further into the book. This is the moment where Rhiannon's like, I really don't know if I can love you, A. It's just too difficult, you being in all these different bodies. Oh my god. So maybe if this chapter existed in a book where there was some further reflection later on where A is realizing, you know what, I was a terrible person by thinking those thoughts, maybe it would have had some merit. However, it's kind of just there in the book and then never addressed again afterwards, and it's fucking disgusting. Actually, I have no clue what message David Levithan wanted to send by including that chapter. Here we are, it's there. Earlier I talked about how the exposition of how A's life works is peppered throughout the book, right? The more that Rhiannon learns about A, the more we as a reader learn. Something I feel that could have probably been squared off earlier in the book to improve the believability of this is how A kind of just doesn't tell anyone for a while that this is the life they're living. I'm just not convinced that A hasn't tried to tell more people what the fuck is going on with them. I don't know if that's just a me opinion, but I was just sat there thinking like, I think I would talk to more people about this and try and like get some support. I knew that there was a movie counterpart to this book and I wanted to watch it because I was curious about how they'd execute something like this, where you've got easily like 50 different characters and you'd have to hire like 50 different actors to play the main part because A is inhabiting all these different people. The movie's not great. I'm gonna be honest, the movie is not great. Apparently I even watched the movie back in 2019 and had no memory of it because I was convinced this was the first time I watched this movie. The only reason I knew that I'd apparently watched this movie before is because I went onto Letterboxd and I'd logged it. Yeah, that speaks for itself. So overall, Every Day, the book, conceptually is a really cool idea. I think it just failed to execute it in a way that is super compelling, and there are many chapters that just ended up pissing me off more than anything else. I feel like there is just a core issue with the characterization in this book of A and how we're supposed to connect to them as a reader. So I'm gonna be really honest, I don't have any clue why or how this ended up on my favorites books list. Like, it is not revolutionary. I gave this 3 stars out of 5 having reread it. Even then, I think that's too kind. Having had more time to mull on it, I might even put it down to 2.5 stars because I have just kind of processed and thought harder about that chapter, and that's really fucked me off actually. But yes, I hope you enjoyed this incredibly bad lit video discussing Every Day by David Levithan. What is quite funny is that another book on my favorites list that I need to reread has essentially the same concept as this book. It's Mercy by Rebecca Lim, except it's that an angel inhabits people's bodies, and she doesn't do it every day. I think I was just obsessed with the concept of this book more so than the execution. But yeah, not my taste anymore, and I'm not super surprised by that. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in another rereading video soon. Bye bye!